Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's now 5:30 p.m. and we'd like to welcome you to the ISPE Boston Chapter's Ethnocultural Diversity and Inclusion Kickoff Panel Discussion. My name is Eric Fells. I'm past president of the Boston Chapter and an associate director over at Takeda. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. First off, I'd like to thank our program sponsor, Delta Project Management. Next, some information on how you can participate tonight. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions by typing them into a Q&A session in Pigeonhole. A link to Pigeonhole platform will be provided in your confirmation email and also be listed in the chat box. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and it's up to you to vote on those questions to be spoken about. We also collect these questions and address them at the end of the presentation. Lastly, we hope that you'll continue the conversation on the chapter's social media platforms listed here. For those that aren't familiar with ISPE, let me just give a brief overview. ISPE was founded in 1980. You can see its core values here, but it's the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers. It's the world's largest not-for-profit association that serves the members by our leading scientific, technical, and regulatory agencies. The Boston chapter was founded in 1992 and represents that services 1,600 professionals in the New England region. We're the largest and most active chapter of ISPE. And I'll hand it off to Eni Adedokian.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eni Adedokian. I am a change champion for Takeda Pharmaceuticals here in Massachusetts. And tonight you all are here for a very special event. It is the kickoff of what we are calling our Ethnocultural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And we really wanted to share with you a little bit of the history and what that name really means to this industry. So a lot of you are familiar with DEI, you're familiar with DE&I initiatives within your own organizations, your own companies, and what you see maybe day to day. But nobody really talks about what does that mean. Well, if you break it down, diversity is, let's put it at a table setting. Diversity means that there are a bunch of different types of people at that table and that they are all welcome to that table. Equity means that everyone at that table has a voice and that it's heard equally. Every voice matters and every voice is its own. Inclusion means that all are welcome, not just because of the voice that they offer, but simply because they are. The reason that we decided to call this the Ethnocultural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is because from a ethno or ethnicity background and a cultural background, we all have so much to offer. And we want to make sure that here within ISPE's, I'll call it virtual walls, that all of those voices are included, that they are heard and equal, and that they are allowed to be at the table. Next slide. With that, our mission statement for this committee is that the Ethnocultural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee really fosters diversity and inclusion within the broader ISPE community. And so while we are right now talking about Boston, we are excited to share this globally and to really involve as many people as we can. What we really aim to do is provide education and increase awareness about racial disparities within our industry, the pharmaceutical industry, enhance recruitment and retention. So really understand why people of color or BIPOC people leave the industry or kind of fall off from the STEM related topics as they go through their career or academia. And third, to cultivate partnerships with existing organizations, whether it be the NSBE or SWE or other organizations that focus on supporting and lifting up people of color and of diverse backgrounds. Next slide. Our goals this year are to really create opportunities for engagement and disclosure related to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to coordinate with some of those organizations that I just mentioned to create additional programs and work together mutually, to develop programs and potentially scholarships that will help support some of these students and our colleagues, and to sponsor ISPE memberships for individuals within this group of diverse backgrounds. With that, we want to open up tonight's event, and I would like to introduce our moderator, Martin Kimani. He is an Associate Director of Process Sciences with Sarepta Therapeutics, as well as an adjunct professor at Northeastern University. Tonight is a very exciting program, and so Martin, please take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Annie. I appreciate that, and welcome everyone to the to this session. So I'd like to quickly, if you could go to the next slide, thank you. I'll introduce our speakers, but first and foremost, I just want to speak to the audience. We thank you so much for being with us. This is an opportunity for us to, essentially, we have a very diverse, in terms of experience with our speakers. They bring with them a lot of background and experience within the diversity and inclusion field. So this is our chance to learn the baseline, essentially learn what opportunities are there within diversity and inclusion, what has been done, what type of programs are available. And then once we learn that, right, we identify how can we get involved to essentially push the mark with for diversity and inclusion, either within our communities or within our within our workforce, right? Or maybe some of you might be students. How do you improve how you have difficult conversations, with friends and family? And then finally, after we learn all that and we see how we can get involved, I encourage everybody to take action out of this event, right? So that could be either joining one of the programs that our speakers are going to mention, or just trying to have those harder conversations about, some of the things that you might learn about from this event. So I just want to talk quickly to our speakers and kind of give you a background about our audience, right? So our audience with the pharmaceutical engineers and biotech here in the Boston, you're going to have some of us are students, right? Some of us are young professionals just starting off our careers within the bio and pharma industry. You might also have some of the audience members that might be on the executive board or directors within their respective companies. And so this will be a great opportunity for them to learn about how they can incorporate the D&I within their companies. And then, as we know, right, all of us, either you're students or all the way at executive level, we also have families, right? So, we are mothers, we're fathers, we're brothers, we're sisters. So, anything that we learn from here might be able to help talk to our family members about how they can get involved by learning about the programs that you're going to be speaking about. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce our speakers, and then what we'll do in regards to the flow of the program is after I introduce the speakers, each of them is going to give us a quick 5 to 7 minute overview about the program. Specifically, we've asked them to talk about 2 to 3 programs within their diversity and inclusion field that they oversee, with a focus of, why did they start those programs, how have they been involved, and what type of impact have those programs made within D&I. And then after we do that, so that should take us about, 20 to 25 minutes to do that. We're gonna switch right into our Q&A section. And so within our Q&A section, this is that time for the audience members to ask some triggered questions based off of what we've heard from the speakers. So the way we're going to moderate the the audience interaction with our speakers, it's not the same, get a mic and speak. We're not in person, but we're going to use the Pigeonhole system. So I don't know how many of the audience members have been exposed to the Pigeonhole, but essentially, if I can ask Catherine to just put a link of the Pigeonhole link on this chat. And so you can access the Pigeonhole there. and there's a login for you to be able to participate. And when you go to the Pigeonhole, you're gonna see some starter questions that we can vote on. And I'm gonna basically take the top question that the audience members have picked, and I'm gonna, essentially ask the speakers within the line of our conversation. So if you see one of the questions that's not necessarily, you want to ask a little more of a directed question, feel free to. You also have the option of putting in your own question, and essentially, hopefully, everybody else in the audience agrees with you that we should, vote that and ask that question. So. With that, let me quickly introduce the speakers that are in front of us. So first and foremost, we have Dr. John Amendaris, excuse me. He's actually the Vice Provost for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion over at Northeastern University. I had a chance to have some in-depth conversations, and he'll have some pretty good background, particularly catering to some of those executive people who are in the executive line or director level within the companies. How can we make changes within on the organizational side that can essentially improve diversity and inclusion within our companies? Then we have Dr. Richard O'Brien. He's a lecturer and a director of the John D. O'Brien African American Institute over at Northeastern University. I actually had the pleasure of working in the institute during my undergrad year, so I know Dr. Richard O'Brien personally. He brings with him a lot of experience within the diversity and inclusion, great programs that cater towards high school, community outreach events in the inner cities of Boston, going into some of the scholarship opportunities to foster movement within the African American and diversity in general of our student population at Northeastern. So he's going to talk to us about that. So we welcome Dr. Richard O'Brien to the speaker series. Next, we have Dean Richard Harris. So he's the assistant dean over at Northeastern University within the College of Engineering, and he particularly is focused on increasing the representation of underrepresented students, whether it be from transitioning from high school into college, giving them the opportunities to be able to get into scholarship opportunities, or just fostering some type of what do you call it? Right, some type of programs that can foster, how they transition into college. And actually, I can speak personally. Dean Harris, he actually recruited me from when I was in high school, brought me into Northeastern, so I can speak about the success of the programs that he's had in place. Not only does he do that from high school to college, but he also fosters, bridges the gap between the bachelors and some of the ability to get into doctoral programs, right, for minority students. So he'll talk about those programs. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Zolick. So she's a assistant professor and the faculty director within the Lowell Institute School, which is also at Northeastern University. So we do have a this is all Northeastern based over here, but that should tell you that Northeastern does a good job of catering to the community at hand, right? So, but Dr. Elizabeth Zolick, so she'll talk about what the Lowell Institute School means and what type of opportunities are there for, you might be, a father or a mother, and you're like, okay, I want to go back to school. Are there opportunities for you, or if you're in a community college, are there opportunities for you?
I've got to turn my thing off.
Are there opportunities for you to go back to school and essentially pursue a career within the biotech field? So we have a great speakers in front of us, and so looking forward to hearing the background. Right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We're actually going to start with Dr. Elizabeth Zolick, so she can give you a little bit of information about the Lowell Institute School, answering the questions about what made you get started within diversity and inclusion, and how are your programs catering towards diversity and inclusion.
Thanks, Martin. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone tonight and to share some of the exciting things that are going on at Northeastern. I love your support of Northeastern, but there's still so much work to be done in this space, and I'm proud to be a small cog in the wheel that's doing this work. So I'm coming to you tonight as the director of the Lowell Institute School at Northeastern. And the Lowell Institute School is really our bachelor's degree completion programs that are in the STEM space. So what is bachelor's degree completion, you might wonder? So if you have some college credit, you have an associate's degree, but you haven't earned a bachelor's degree yet, these programs are created to cater to that student population. Most of our students are coming from community college partners. We work really closely with our community college partners to create articulation agreements and bring in students. All of our courses are at night or online, and we have a lower price point than Northeastern State program because it's a different student experience. Our students aren't residential. I know they don't live on campus, and therefore the experience is different. The majority of our instructors are industry partners, like those who are here before you. Martin mentioned that he is an adjunct at Northeastern, and we have similar, part-time lecturers who teach our courses because we really want to make sure that our students are learning content that they can bring directly to the workforce. I was really excited to take on this role at Northeastern because I'm passionate about increasing access to education, because I do believe that education opens up career opportunities and can really raise a family out of poverty. I'm really proud to talk about two specific programs that Northeastern's engaged in tonight. And the first one is something that we call the Associates to Master's Degree Program. And this is a program where students get their associate's degree at a community college, they get their bachelor's degree and the professional studies, and then they get their master's degree in one additional year. And all of this is in the biotechnology space. And I think what's really exciting about this is we have an NSF grant for 5 years for $4.4 million. And I bring up how much money the grant is for because the exciting thing about this grant is the majority of the funds go towards scholarship money. So the out-of-pocket cost for a student to get their associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree is $0. We also have additional philanthropy that comes from a private family foundation that helps to support those students. And money is not enough to help students graduate from this pathway. They also need additional wraparound support services like mentorship. So we work really closely with our industry partners to provide mentors that look like our student population. We also have things like seminars to help to demystify the biotech career path. So what is the career path? What are these jobs? I hear things like regulatory affairs and quality and R&D, biomanufacturing. What does that mean to me as a student, and how will I get there? And so we do a lot with bringing in industry partners to help to communicate those pathways to our learners. We also provide additional assistance in things like textbooks, computers, transportation costs, because it's not just paying the tuition bill that our students need support in, but there's lots of other components to the getting a degree that are outside of the actual tuition cost. We also do things like engaging students' families. What does a day at Northeastern look like? We want to bring the families onto campus so they understand where their loved ones are spending all of their time. So we really work hard to make sure we're creating this engaging, informed environment in the biotechnology space. And this program has some really exciting metrics. Our retention rate is over 90%. We have over 60% females in our A2M pathway, and over 53% racial ethnic diversity within our pathway. So for us, it's a really successful pathway in that it's increasing the diversity pipeline that's serving our industry partners. Another exciting program is one that we've done in partnership with Middlesex Community College, Takeda, and AbbVie, and that's an earn and learn model, where we've created opportunities for our students to have a full-time employment and part-time education opportunity. So they're employed by Takeda or AbbVie full-time while they're getting their degree part-time. And they start by getting their associate's degree at Middlesex Community College and then continue on this pathway to get their bachelor's, and if they so choose, their master's. The out-of-pocket cost to that program is not zero, but because we've taken the time to have a tight articulation agreement and make sure all the courses transfer, we're really decreasing the time to degree attainment. And then we also offer Lowell Institute School scholarships for up to $15,000 depending on need. And with the tuition reimbursement companies, we're bringing the added cost to less than $5,000 a year to the student. So these are two examples of pathways that we've created to help to, one, create paths to the biotechnology industry, but also to create degree attainment. And we've seen some amazing success stories already of students who now make more money than I do, who were unemployed 4 years ago. And to me, that's the ultimate sign of success. When we have students who not only have their degree, but they have a job in hand and they're really raising their families out of poverty. And I don't want to take too much time. Actually, I did turn on my timer and I'm a little bit over 5 minutes. So I do want to pass the baton back to Martin, but I'm looking forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zolick. We really appreciate that background. And it sounds like, there's a lot of opportunities. You've done great work. 90% retention rate is unbelievable for a program of this magnitude. So thank you. Next, and as you're hearing from the speakers, feel free to, the pigeonhole should be active. Feel free to ask some questions, just, as you're going through and you're listening to the speakers, give their background on the programs that are available. Next, I'd like to shoot it over to Dean Richard Harris, so he can give us a little bit of background about some of the programs that he's partaken in. Dean Harris, the floor is yours.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you to ISPE for having invited me and my colleagues here, as well as to those of you who've taken time out of your schedule to really share this unique moment with us. So as Martin mentioned, I've known Martin and others like Martin prior to the start of their Northeastern University journey, and also beyond. I think I'll use Martin a little bit as a case example. I remember when Martin came into Northeastern, very engaged, participating through our Summer Bridge program as a way to provide an opportunity for students to develop a sense of connectedness, to build a cohort relationship, and ultimately to start to see themselves in the eyes of their classmates, when oftentimes they may not be that fully represented. Essentially, Northeastern is what's termed a PWI. Predominantly white institution, just as there are HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. There are HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions. There are teacups, tribal council university institutions, and female majority institutions as well. So there's a whole host of pathways that students can come through. And so I remember Martin coming through our undergraduate program, doing very well. I remember we had discussions about graduate school, and he was at a point in his journey where he saw fit to go into industry right away, and along the way decided to go after his graduate degree, his master's, while working, and I assume that was a tuition reimbursement program, although we try to prepare students to understand the value proposition of a fully funded graduate degree pathway that facilitates both 100% tuition as well as a stipend along with health insurance. And I remembered somewhere along the way, Martin came back and said, I think I'm going to go after my PhD. And it was a fulfilling thing to hear, because what Martin said was, he says, I see individuals, and I won't name the company, that he was with a biotech firm that are involved in consulting and are bringing knowledge and information to this biotech firm that he was working at, but he realized he could do just as well, provide a level of consulting, but because he didn't have that PhD, it limited his ability and his access to be able to be heard, to have not just input, but to have impact. And so it was great to see when he returned to Northeastern to pursue his PhD. And for all intents and purposes, it was the crowning moment of Martin's ascension along that trajectory. So I have a program called NUPRIME, Northeastern University's programs in multicultural engineering. It's existed since 1974. It focuses on developing underrepresented populations to achieving their full potential, and that's K to grade. And so we have opportunities, and when I say K to grade, that's K through 12, and then community college all the way through PhD. And so we have programs like the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, a Bridge to the Doctorate program, which funds underrepresented students in STEM. So it's broadly STEM, although I'm focusing at points in time in engineering. We also have the National Gem Consortium, which is a great opportunity for companies like Takeda and others to be a part of, because it presents a unique pathway for you to be able to get access to top tier talent that are pursuing their PhD. Very many of the federally funded research and development centers, the Oak Ridge, the Brookhavens, the MIT Lincoln Labs, the Draper Labs, the MITRE are all part of this unique opportunity. And since 1976, GEM has produced over 4,000 African American and Hispanic PhDs. And many of them have been at one time CEOs of many companies. One such person, Ursula Burns, who just stepped down as CEO of Xerox company, but they've also become university presidents and so on. So it presents a unique opportunity to help students achieve their full potential. And the one thing I also want to share is the integration of the societies, the National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, Society of Women Engineers, American Indian Society for Engineering and Science, Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers, and OSTEM, Out in STEM. So there is a whole ecosystem that we provide and support in order to make sure that there's the full representation of those individuals based on their intersectional identities. And so the last thing I'm going to say is we produce what's called a systems integrated approach. And so we understand the holistic importance of meeting others where they are, helping them to be their true self, while at the same time not feeling like they have to give up their identities in the process. And then finally, we've moved our students to stop thinking about getting a job to understand the importance of a career. And so getting a job means that you can work for someone else, means you can work for the post office. It's a great job, great benefits. But in terms of a career, we want our students to realize the pathways that are open to them in order to help them achieve their full potential. So that's kind of a summary of what I do in the program called NUPRIME that encompasses that K to Gray pathway.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dean Harris, for that background. I did not recognize that Northeastern was a PWI, predominantly white institute. So thanks for that background. And as we're learning more and more about our speakers and some of the opportunities that are, available, this is the time for us to learn the baseline. What exactly does, what opportunities are there that are helping diversity and inclusion move forward? And then we can identify how we can get involved. So thank you for that. So I just want to quickly mention that on our Pigeonhole, I was just updated that there's a 200 character cap. So as you ask your questions, just be aware there's a 200 character cap. So just keep that in mind. So next, I want to go over to Dr. Richard O'Brien, who is the director of the John D. O'Brien African American Institute at Northeastern. So he can give us a little bit of background, mix it in some of the community outreach programs that are available, and incorporate in some of the programs that, other than the community outreach programs, any other programs that that he's been part of that foster the development of diversity and inclusion. So Dr. Richard O'Brien, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Kimani. I won't call you Martin. You earned the title, brother. I wanted to also, like my colleague Dean Harris, thank ISPE for the opportunity to come and speak with you, and thank you all so much for taking the time out of your evening to spend it with us. Happy Black History Month. We are wrapping up our programming and activities this week, and as you can see, my backdrop is the images of folks who have made history in our community, and we add new faces every year. And you see call her doctor, but Vice President Kamala Harris, we just added her to the poster this year. And so we see our role as really making sure to highlight some of the cultural opportunities that the Black community present to Northeastern. I can't take credit for what the John D. O'Brien African American Institute does, because it's been on Northeastern's campus for 50 years plus. And there have been a lot of people who have worked really hard to keep the Institute here on Northeastern's campus and to continue to help it to grow. And alumni like Martin and others have really, made it possible for us to keep doing the work that we do, because he is evidence that if you help and support somebody, they can go on to do some great things. And so the types of community effort that the Institute has been involved in over the years is, in my opinion, a big part of why Northeastern is what it is. The relationships that we have with the local school system, the relationships we have with local community organizations, the relationships we have with local community leaders all play a big part in why we are able to be such an important access between the university and the community. We often have a lot of high schools that will bring their students to campus, and they will come and spend time at the Institute. And we take the opportunity to not only share with them about what the university has to offer, but really that the Institute is a place that is here to support them and embrace them. And I encourage students that wherever they go, whether it's Northeastern or anywhere, that they look for a place like the Institute that can be a home away from home for them. We have the kind of programs that help students transition from, entering into the university to adjusting to college environment. Programs like our Ujima Global Leaders Program has been around for, now a good 40 years, and has had a lot of people that have come through, been supported, particularly in that first year, which statistics show that if students are going to drop out, they usually drop out after their first year. And so helping them to get over that hurdle and make it into their second year successfully is a big part of what we do. And as Dean Harris said, focusing in on K to gray, although I've never heard the gray part. Martin and I may beg to differ, we PhDs calling us grays. But it's important for us to take young people from that time when they're in high school and thinking about college, helping them to work through those decisions. And then when they come, to not just let them go into the wilderness, but to stay with them. And we stay with them all the way through their undergraduate experience. And part of that, we focus on helping them to consider graduate school, particularly now because graduate education is such an important additive to somebody for their success. And we have a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Graduate Fellowship Program that is designed to really help students if they want to go from that undergrad into graduate, that they don't necessarily feel the pinch of the cost of going on to graduate school. And the MLK Fellowship Program helps them to do that. The last thing that I want to share is we work with employers. We've had some of the biggest name employers in our building that have come to do employee outreach just for the Black and Latino student population. We've had Google, we've had Apple, we've had GE, and they come in and set up and really take the time to get to know the students, demystify the process of trying to get hired, and really help them feel like the attention is paid to them as opposed to some of the other broader employment fairs where they feel like they're just one in a sea of people. And I would encourage folks that are looking to do recruitment, that you really narrow it down and focus it in a way where you can have some time to connect with the students and get to know them and know what they're interested in, and get people like Martin to really get a chance to say, hey, I've been where you are, this is where you can be, and this is how you do it. So thank you so much, Martin, and I look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. O'Brien. And yeah, that's great. With a top-tier institution like ourselves, with the core programs that are there that pull in employers, it's good to know that not only the students, there's also programs where students who are moving into their career path, they can sit down, right? So I think there's a night where you have one of the representatives from some of this top-tier companies come in and sit down with the students and essentially have an informal interview process. So I think it's really, really good to hear the employer engagement aspect of the institute. And I make a challenge to our audience because I heard GE, I heard Google, I heard a lot of IT, but I didn't hear a lot of biotech and pharma, right? So maybe there's an opportunity where we can get involved in such a program. So thank you so much. So next, I'd like to move it over to Dr. John Amendaris. He is the Vice Provost, as I mentioned, of the Institutional Diversity and Inclusion at Northeastern, and he'll quickly give us some background about some of the programs that he oversees. Dr. Amendaris, I'd like to open up the floor for you.
think you're on mute, John.
I'm muting myself today. It's been my plague. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. Thank you ISPE for putting this on. As Martin shared, I'm John Amendaris, Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion. Normally when I give talks to groups, I like to give a quiz, and I'm going to give a quiz that stumped my colleagues who are part of the panel today. And what you can do is just think of the answers on your own or write them down, and then later on you can go look them up. But so here's the quiz. How do you put an elephant in a refrigerator? The second question is, how do you put a giraffe in a refrigerator? The third question is, if you remember from your childhood that the lion is the king of the jungle, if the lion as the king of the jungle calls a conference of all the animals in his kingdom, who doesn't come to his conference? And then the last question is, you come to a river that you have to get across. It's where the crocodiles live. There's no way to swing across. There's nothing to use to float across. There's no rocks that you can skip across. How do you get across the river? So on your own, you can go look, think of what the answers are, and then you can go look them up later. But before you look them up, I want you to think about this. If you give that quiz to kids under the age of 7, they are more likely to get the answers correct than adults. And often when I ask groups that, and tell them that and ask them why do they think that is, people will come up with different types of responses. And inevitably someone will say, well, kids think out of the box. And I say, you're close, they don't have a box yet. Because I want you to think about your child. As kids, and I have little kids downstairs wrecking havoc, you know, we don't see skin color. It doesn't matter to us yet. We don't understand that supposedly in our society, it's better to be rich versus poor, or tall versus short, or to have more hair versus less hair, or blonde hair versus dark hair, whatever it is, right? We haven't been indoctrinated yet with things that we're supposed to categorize people with, right? And so we have this childhood innocence that allows kids to get more answers correct than adults. So I want you to write down what you thought the answers were and then go look them up and see how many you got correct or not. And I give that quiz because it's a segue into what we're trying to do, what my colleagues are trying to do, what Dr. Zulick is trying to do, and what I hope you all want to do as well, which is break down the mental models that get in the way of allowing people to have an opportunity or keep them from pursuing an opportunity, right? And so the programs that we try and do at Northeastern are trying to do that. So Dr. O'Brien mentioned this program, Black and Latinx. What we're trying to do with that program is to take these students out into the community to see professionals that look like them, right? Because their mental models are there aren't Black scientists, there aren't women scientists, whatever it is, right? And so by going out into the community and seeing someone who looks like them, we're starting to break down those mental models, right? And through bringing those students to your companies, to your organizations, you know, through what Dr. Zolick is doing with the Lowell Institute, there are smart kids who unfortunately through the realities of their life start off in community college, right? But they don't fit the mental model of the path that some of you took to get to where you are, right? So by partnering with Liz, you get to see students and they're breaking down those mental models we have. So the Black Latinx program is something that we do partner with. I do think we went to Biogen last year before the pandemic, so they've gotten on board with that. But it's a great opportunity to start to connect with these young adults and break down the mental models, but also build social capital, because that's the other thing we're trying to do. When you are a first-gen low-income college student, you don't have the networks that folks like, I'm gonna put Dr. O'Brien on the spot. He and I are second-gen doctoral degree holders. And so we can tap into the networks that were developed by our parents. But when you don't have that, you have a great disadvantage. So when you offer up your partnership to be mentors, to be role models, to sponsor our students, or any student from any college who comes from an underserved, underrepresented community, you're not only breaking down those mental models, but you're helping them build social capital, because now they know someone, right? Now they know someone who they can tap into their networks about opportunities, who can put their name in the hat for an opportunity that your company may have. So that's in a nutshell what I do and what I do in partnership with my colleagues, and what we're hoping that you all will think about and go back and explore with your own organizations around how can we better partner with the local colleges to provide these avenues to break down mental models, to build up social capital, to allow these young adults to see themselves in you all or your colleagues and say, I can do this, right? And Martin shared that we had a great conversation, and I'm gonna put Dean Harris on the spot, but he shared Dean Harris was the person who helped him realize I could do this. And you heard that through Dean Harris sharing Martin's story, right? Martin had these great experiences that made him realize I'm smart enough and I'm good enough to do this. And that's what we need from all of you. We need your help to create these opportunities and partnerships that allow our students and these young adults, not just at Northeastern, but any of the colleges in the area, to overcome the mental models that have been created that don't allow them to see themselves as scientists, as researchers, as doctors, as leaders of organizations, and you all can be a part of fixing that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Amendaris, for that background. And we are so delighted to have you over here. So we want to switch directly into our Q&A session. And the way I want to start it off is, we want to have some background about why does diversity and inclusion matter to us here in the biotech pharma field. We know that it would matter, right, in a marketing sense, where the more diverse perspectives that you can have in marketing, right, the more your company can essentially have a better chance at gaining customers. But for some of the companies that we work in, we're really primarily more supply logistics companies, where or we're doing testing. So some of the job responsibilities, you can have quality assurance, you can have analytical testing, people who are doing quality control. You can have engineers who are looking at the process. All of this are essentially backroom positions. And so, what I want to move into is essentially open it up to the speakers to essentially give us a background of why should D&I matter. And before we get into that section, I want to show this graphic about essentially what is the baseline with diversity and inclusion. There's some data that, this data, take it with a grain of salt because we don't have specifics for biotech and pharma, but at least let's see share this slides here. So what I've done, I've given you some visuals here. On the left side is all the benefits, and on the right side, it's all the negatives. So in terms of the benefits, you can see there that the data suggests diversity correlates with better financial performance. Well, how much so? So you can see there was a study done by McKinsey back in 2018, and you can see the type of companies that they were able to do the surveys on. You can see 10% of their respondents were based in healthcare and pharma. But without going into that breakdown, the top line results were that if you have a company with a higher diversity percentage in your executive board, you have a 35% better performance in your company. In other words, the likelihood of financial performance is above the national industry if your executive board is diverse. So that's one of the data points that we can look at. Another survey by the Harvard Business Review back in 2013 on the bottom left, there was an output that says employees of firms with 2D diversity. And I learned what 2D diversity is, right? So it's essentially you have inherent, you were born in a ethnical or with a, you have some type of, diversity in that you were born with. But then there's also the acquired diversity, which is the interactions that you've gained through your experiences. And so employees that have that type of 2D diversity are 45% likelier to report growth in their companies and 70% likelier to report that their firm was able to get into an emerging market or a new market. These numbers sound great, but we have to have a caveat with anything that we see that's statistical based, right? So, as the Harvard Business Review said, 78% of those employees that were surveyed, they worked in companies that lacked the 2D diversity in their leadership. That's what they reported. And what's something that's really, really important to note, and when you see all these numbers about diversity, is really the part there on the right, where we talk about what is the diversity of the leadership of your companies in different industries, particularly looking at the US. So this survey came out from McKinsey in 2018, and they show that for the US, about 12% of the executive team is diverse, right? Where you compare the board of directors, about 15%, and that's not in par with the population of 39%. Of the US come from an ethnic background. So this looks great, right? 12%, 15%, that might be, a good stat. But then we start to realize that the companies that are reporting here when we look at as a whole, we look at the Department of Labor, you look at the bottom there, diversity reporting at Fortune 500 companies, only 3% of the companies actually report the diversity data within their organization. We have about almost 80% of companies that do not report this diversity within the institution. So although this numbers may look, very good with the 12% on the executive board, 15% on the 12% of the executive team, 15% of the board of directors, we're still lacking in how we are communicating our company demographics to the Department of Labor. So with that background, I really want to get into talking more and more about why should we care about diversity, particularly in general as an organization? And then the second part is more specifically, why should bio and pharma companies, which employ mostly, the back room personnel, why should we have diversity in that background? And so we can start with anybody who's available. Maybe Dr. Zolick, we could start with you.
I think anytime that you have the diversity of voices and background, it really helps to change the whole culture of your organization. And for us, we found in our student population that it's really important for them to see themselves in these roles that they're taking part in. And so, we have lots of engagement with different companies, which is great. But for us, I think what's most powerful for our students is for them to see themselves, someone who's been in their shoes, actually on a panel or as their mentor, or who's leading a company. Because for them, it all of a sudden, I think, opens up the door to say, this could be me, and I can imagine myself in this position. And so, we've worked really hard to create, a support network for our student population that really looks like them, who has similar backgrounds to them. Over 50% of our learners in our program are first-generation college students. So they want to be able to talk to someone who can relate to them on that struggle. And I think Dr. Harris made a really interesting point that we're a predominantly white institute. I'm a white female, so how can I connect with my students on that level? And I can't. And so I need to find other students, other students and mentors who can fill that void. And I think the same is true when thinking up all the way to the level of CEO for these companies for our learners.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's a really good background. Dean Harris, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think it's a much daunting one, but at the end of the day, I'm an engineer by degree, and while we look at the metrics and the numbers, there's also a formulation that we need to really think about, which is diversity of identity brings about diversity of experiences, which results in diversity of thought. Oftentimes we hear folks default directly to diversity of thought and somehow ignore the importance of those identities, which inherently bring different experiences and therefore inform how those individuals with those identities and the intersectionality of their profession informs a way of looking at developing solutions to problems that have to be based at times within a cultural context. And so we help our students to understand that there is a cultural context in the way you define a problem. And then as a result of that, there becomes a culturally relevant solution to that problem in ways that others may not fully appreciate because they don't have that level of identity that they come from. And so that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing I would say, simply put, Dr. Kizzy Corbett, right? We all know who she is, don't we? I'm hearing crickets.
Please give us the background, please.
So Dr. Kizzy Corbett is the seminal researcher that helped to launch the study on the mRNA that's now been put forth as developing the vaccines to address our problems in the US, but also globally. And so she's an African-American female. And the reality is that individual represents a segment of our population that, again, is historically underrepresented. And heaven forbid, had she not been in the right place at the right time, how much longer might we be waiting to get a solution to a relevant and definitely global problem had she not been provided an opportunity to be front and center and integral, I'm talking about seminally, to that research that we're now all seeing the benefits of. So that's someone that comes from your space, right? So I would say that to me reflects the value proposition of having a diverse level of identities, bringing about diverse experiences, ultimately getting diverse thoughts into how we look to solve problems of a global and in many ways systemic nature.
Right. Yep. I see Tanika Jones knew it was a vaccine researcher. I see there in the comments section. So, Dr. O'Brien, what are your thoughts?
So, Dr. Zulick, I appreciate your response, but I would not want to downplay the value of allyship. It's really important in this work that everybody feel like they can contribute and that they can make a difference. And yes, there are times and there are moments when it certainly would be more beneficial if an African American was to engage in issues with African American students, but that shouldn't preclude anybody else from feeling like they can't or feel like the opportunity is not right. As Dr. King said, it's always the right time to do the right thing. And I think allyship really spreads across a tremendous spectrum, right? We have our Black History Month activities this month. And one of the things that the Black community has really begun to, I think, make progress in, and that's with the LGBT community. And one of the things that we try to do with the Black History Month is support and help promote with our LGBT community, Black students. And, we promoted one of their events that they had during Black History Month. And they were so appreciative. They were on social media talking about how much they appreciate the support of the Institute that they weren't sure that they were going to get, And so I think sometimes it's just being a good ally, and sometimes the smallest thing you do to be supportive can make a big difference for somebody who's dealing and struggling with some of these issues.
Excellent. Dr. Amendaris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was chatting with a young lady who used to work for me, who now works for Ernst & Young last week. And we were talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion. And to her company, if they don't embrace it, nobody's going to die, right? If Coca-Cola doesn't embrace diversity, nobody's going to die from not drinking enough Coca-Cola in their life, right? But the reality is, in many industries, in many areas, people are dying because we're not paying attention to this thing called diversity, inclusion, and equity, right? So many of the people on the call today are trying to develop, therapeutics to treat diseases and other things that afflict people. But if you knew or realized that some people aren't going to get them, either because of this lack of equity or mistrust of the healthcare system or flaws in that healthcare system, and we're seeing it play out right now with who gets access to the vaccine, then it shows why this thing called diversity and inclusion is important, right? Dr. Harris shared the name of someone who's involved in the research behind to the critical vaccines, but for communities of color, if they don't know that, then they don't trust that therapeutic, right? And there's a long history in this country of what medicine and researchers have done to communities of color to build a mistrust, right? And so now it's trust us, we have this cure for you, but I don't see anyone who looks like me who made that cure. I don't see anyone who looked like me who's giving me that cure, putting it in my arm. Why should I trust you, right? So I think, our challenge as a society is how do we make sure we bring the diversity of thought and perspective, but also realize that that's also going to go a long way at solving this trust issue that many communities have with organizations or industries.
Excellent. I think, yeah, that makes sense. I think one thing also to point out is in the back room, as someone who's been in biotech working, workforce retention is also a major thing, right? When the people around you, are not diverse, you also as a, other than just the company performance, just in general, how do you feel about being with that company when you're not necessarily, someone who doesn't look like you, someone who looks like you is not around. So I think, what you were talking about, Dr. Zolick, is the association, right? You feeling like, who do you associate with? I think it's very important to note, and I also learned about diversity of identity, right? As Dean Harris and Dr. O'Brien and Dr. Amendaris were talking about, getting people who look like us, in those companies, we feel more comfortable to essentially take on some of their products as well. So thank you for that. I want to make sure that people who are on the Pigeonhole, I see a lot of I see some questions there. I see some people voting. I myself try to go on there, and I recognize that in order to assess the Pigeonhole question, you have to click on enter the Q&A. So, if you're having any issues when you go to the website, the landing page, click on enter the Q&A. I might be young, but I'm still, old in regards to my telecommunication and technology. So I want.
We're part of the gray, Mike. We're part of the gray, man.
We're probably gray, exactly. So I want to move on to another question here, and I want to make sure, I want to open it up, right? I don't want us to go in order. Let's just have a conversation here. One of the things is you guys mentioned about so many diverse programs that are going on between K and Gray, right? All the way through to community outreach programs. We have, employee engagement. So with all of these great opportunities, whether they be in scholarships or opportunities for minorities to get involved in, where's the gap? I mean, where do you guys find gaps in the programs that you are in, and how can we, in the positions that we are in, how can we get involved to essentially close those gaps in diversity and inclusion? And I'd like to just open this up to the speakers.
Okay, if I could start, the gaps are, throughout the system, and depending on which part of the system you're looking at, you have these siloed efforts and initiatives that are taking place that in many cases have been taking place for decades. But because there's this disconnect between what the community might be aware of or have the opportunity to be exposed to, because of the lack of what I call institutional or systemic alignment. For instance, our K through 12 educational system is based on your zip code. If you're in the right zip code, that will determine the quality of public school or K through 12 education that you're going to get exposed to, which is not going to be consistent, equitably distributed across the spectrum. And so we're dealing with challenges that have a very national and in some cases a very broad level of need, but yet when we get down to the level of where the rubber meets the road, as it does often within the communities that are oftentimes disadvantaged, disenfranchised, that's where we are unable to fully address those gaps, except where we are able to step in, meaning companies, corporations, government. So the thing I would say, the last thing I would say, we need to look at this, and Dr. Charles Vest put it best. He said, we need to look at this as more than just a three-legged stool. We need to look at the fact that there's government involvement that must be critical and key. There must be higher ed or educational systems that are part of this. There must be corporate support and involvement. And then there needs to be community engagement, not being told what to do, but being involved in the process of how they feel and how they look at what is needed in their communities so that their children, their communities, from which I came from as well, inner city, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York. In the old days, we called it do or die, Bed-Stuy. But the truth of the matter is only a few select of us made it out. It's not because we were that much smarter or that much more motivated. My mother had a 3rd grade education. My father had a 10th grade education. They came from Honduras. So I'm first generation and immigrant. But it was simply because of being in the right place at the right time and the luck of the draw. by a teacher telling my mother, your son needs to be in this gifted program in order to have certain opportunities.
Wow.
And that's what that made the difference.
Wow.
That shouldn't depend on a luck of the draw. That should be part of the systemic way that we know that we have models of success, best practices, and how do we scale that so we address this broadly.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wow. Yeah. So government involvement, corporate engagement, as well as community engagement. And I think a lot of us
and higher ed
and higher
for the educational system itself as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those 4 legs of the stool.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of mirror, I mean, I can't say it better than how Dr. Harris just said it, but it's so true. There are so many gaps, but I think it's also important to bring up what Dr. Bryant said earlier too. Any way that we can start to move forward and fill, and whether it's as an ally or a mentor or engaging these programs, saying, oh, this model works and I can participate in that today. So whether everyone individually can do their own small part and their corporate partner can do their small part, the government can do the part, but everyone really has to come together and join the ecosystem. And I always call it an ecosystem of support for our students. You know, you do need to have all these different pillars that are supporting our learners in order for them to be successful and really have access to these opportunities.
Right. And where do we find what would be the low hanging fruit? Where do you guys see is the entry point? Where should we be focusing a lot of our attention on? I think Dean Harris was talking about, for him, K through 12, really made a difference in regards to the outreach to make sure that someone in K to 12 is motivated to continue on and make a career. But, is that where we see the lowest hanging fruit, is getting the younger folks involved? Or are there other opportunities, that are lower hanging fruit?
Well, I would say you'd be surprised at how many people come in and out of your life that you can make a difference for. I think sometimes in this line of work, we look to have a big impact, or we look to make a big difference, or we look to correct a system that is daunting in how it is mistreating people, when sometimes it's just helping somebody that is in your purview, right? Somebody that they may not necessarily say to you, please come help me. But if you take the time to get to know and understand what that they're going through or what their challenges are, sometimes it's as simple as making a phone call on their behalf. And it changes the trajectory of their life. I had a student one time, he got into trouble. I won't go into details of the trouble he got into, but it was the last semester of his last year in school, and he was the first in his family to go to college. And the trouble was so severe that our school court system expelled him. Now, mind you, he's in the middle of his final exams. He was distraught, and he came to see us, and, we didn't expect to have to deal with such a crisis around Christmas time. It was in December. But myself and my staff, we stopped what we were doing to try and help this young man. And it was as simple as reaching out to the vice president of student affairs, who on the appeals process could basically overrule what has been decided on. And what ended up happening, well, let me take a step back. A couple of things. One, not only was he about to graduate, and he was a good student, he had a job lined up on Wall Street, right? His mom was not doing well health-wise. She was planning to come to graduation. So expelling him from school was going to have such a dramatic impact on this young man's life, changed the trajectory of his life, right? And so myself and my staff, we advocated for him, and I reached out to the vice president. She was already aware of the situation, but sometimes just a little bit of advocacy can make a big difference. And what ultimately ended up happening was the vice president basically said to him, I'm gonna get, because he finished his final exams. I don't know how he finished it in the middle of all this, but he finished his final exams and he got the necessary credits to graduate. And she basically said to him, I'm gonna give you this degree. I'm not gonna let you walk across the stage, but I want you to walk and don't look back. And don't have any conversations with anybody about this. And he went on to have a successful career at Wall Street. And he came back about 3 or 4 years later, and he stood in the doorway and he was almost in tears saying, thank you, because had we not advocated for him, he probably would have gone in a totally different direction. And so I'm saying all that to say, sometimes it's just as simple as doing one thing for somebody that can make a big difference. Because if all of us do something for somebody, it'll make a big difference in the world.
Right. Thank you so much for that story, Dr. Bryant. Dr. Amendaris, I have a question in regards to like corporate and government involvement. As we heard Dean Harris talk about some of the pillars that we can approach diversity and inclusion. What are your thoughts about how corporate and government can get involved to bridge the gap?
Yeah, you know, there's never enough government money to go around. I think we all know that, right? and I look at the companies and the communities, and there's so many different ways that they can support or step in to fill in the gaps where the government's not doing their part, right? So, you know, Martin and I were chatting early on about summer REUs, and nationally, you know, there may be several hundred REUs, but there's 4,600 universities out there. And those several hundred REUs maybe only take 10 students apiece. So it's a small number. And so, you know, locally, if companies were to decide we're going to sponsor a summer REU at each local college.
Maybe mention
so summer REU is a 10-week program in STEM that typically brings first-gen low-income students, diverse students, but they could also be first-gen low-income poor white kids. To a summer experience. They live on a college campus, they get a stipend, and they spend that 10 weeks in a research lab, right? And that 10-week experience is that light bulb in the head for many of these young adults that I can do this, right? I'm smart enough to do this, right? But there's not enough of those REUs to go out there because there's not enough being funded by the government. And they cost anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 for that 10-week experience to fund the faculty, the doctoral student who might be a part of it, and the student stipend. So if every company were to commit to, I'm going to sponsor a summer REU locally at Northeastern, at BU, at Tufts, at MIT, at the community colleges, it would have a tremendous impact. But it can also bring in a diversity of students to the Boston area who might not think about coming here because they don't have to be from the Boston area. But those are some of the ways that companies can look at some of the money that they have out there and wonder, what do we do with this to have an impact? You know, if you have a company that has a affinity group, an employee resource group, think of ways as how your group can make an impact in a local school. So at Northeastern, we have affinity groups, and we have one called NUPRIME. And every year, pre-pandemic, during the summer, we would do a school supply drive and pick a school and donate the school supplies to those schools, because we know that for some inner city or low income communities, kids go to school without school supplies. And so if you're at a company that has an ERG, what are the things that you all are doing collectively to have an impact on the schools in the area where they lack resources? And a school supply drive is an easy thing to do. You know, every year people, if you have kids like I do, you're buying supplies for your kids, you just buy a few extra. And you create a mechanism where your company can identify a school in need and give those supplies away. So there's a lot of ways that organizations, you know, from a big way, giving money to some REUs, to even small ways, the ways that your company uses their ERGs to support communities.
If I could add to that, what Dr. Armendariz shared is, you know, there's the, and Dr. O'Brien and Dr. Zolick, there's the individual level of giving and engagement and facilitating. There's the institutional level as well. And so your question about low-hanging fruit, and I like to think about institutional levels as well, because institutionalizing opportunities is something that then builds long-term exposure for the current students or individuals and those who are yet to come, right? And so I would say, as the REU institutionalization opportunity would be something great, because you're developing future talent. So, part of your talent development, talent acquisition model should be, how do we get these students or individuals looking at Takeda or Biogen or Vertex and so on, Sanofi, in a way that gets them early, engages them, but also continues to build that kind of pathway going forward. And then the other one I would add is the National Gem Consortium. We are part of the National Gem Consortium. Again, it presents similar in the way Dr. Armendariz described in REU, where you can actually bring in graduate level students prior to the start of their graduate program in that summer for about 4 months, right? May through August, and provide them a competitive stipend and be able to start looking at, does this person potentially mirror the kind of future employee you may want to bring in, and how do they also still support the bottom line? And there are companies like Draper Labs that are local that are doing this, MIT Lincoln Labs that are doing this, MITRE Corporation that are doing this. So, there is an opportunity here within the biotech arena where there's not a strong representation in that space that I would say could be a low-hanging fruit. And we could help facilitate that interest if that's an opportunity you'd want to consider, both with the undergraduate or even high school REUs and graduate level pathways that mirror an REU model as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys, for this background. There's so much rich content in here. And luckily, we're going to, as a recorded session, people can go back afterwards and be able to essentially pick apart some of this programs that you've talked about, the REU programs from Dr. Amendaris, some of this GEM Consortium programs that Dean Harris is talking about, or, Dr. O'Brien was talking about being an advocate, just being an advocate for someone else. I think there's really such a rich amount of content here to help us bridge that gap.
Martin, let me add one more thing too. Mm-hmm. As was mentioned by my colleagues, and the relationship with employers and the higher educational institutions is critical. But the important thing is to take it that one step further and be able to engage in a way that really helps to build a pathway for students as they begin to move on and become professionals. And so I say, even if it's not just with us, if with anybody, set up an environment where it really makes it easy to connect with these students. Get the employers get into a space, demystify the process of what it is required to become a part of their company. And then get to know what these students are interested in, because we have the Rue Institute now up in, is it in Maine or Vermont? I think it's in
Maine.
Well, they were, and we're working with them to try and figure out how to develop a pathway for students of color to go do co-ops or internships at the Rue Institute. And all the traditional trappings are there, right? There's good salary, there's good workplace, they'll accommodate with housing. But I told them also too, they got to think about the intangibles, right? Because what happens is when students get into these remote areas, if they don't take into consideration what their social life is going to be like, what time outside of work is going to be like, places where they go to get a haircut or get their hair done, all these little things that would help to make the experience so much better if you just take into consideration, okay, we'll get you here for a job, but we'll also make sure that we plug you into, if there's a local community that they could be a part of, if there's some activities that you think they would be able to value from, just look at the big picture and the whole ball of wax, so that when the student does commit to coming, it's not just them getting a job, but really building something around them.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
And I was going to add, I don't think when you repeated back some of those asks or, ways to get involved, I was like, I didn't make my asks clear enough. So, there are small things, like we're always looking for mentors for our program. So if you're like, oh, individually, I know I can give time, but I can't commit my organization, be a mentor for us, serve on our advisory board, help to do a seminar, help to demystify the workforce for our students. We're always looking for individuals to engage on that level if you want to do something that's really specific to the biotech educational pathway. If you are leading an organization who can potentially make change, we're always looking for, you know, co-op, and really not co-op, even longer than co-op is traditionally a 6-month internship. We're looking for longer guaranteed employment for our students because the average age of a student in my program is 29. And a lot of times they have family and they're not going to quit their stable job to take a 6-month co-op that may or may not lead to a job offer. So we need longer forms of stable employment. So if you're like, oh yeah, we have, you know, we're using a contract employment agency right now, and we're paying them X amount, you know, instead work with me and we'll create a pathway for our learners to go straight into your program. You know, as long as you also promise that you're going to support them when they get there and kind of create those intangibles that kind of Dr. Bryant was just talking about, because you don't want to put them into an industry position where they're not going to be supported. Right. You can do scholarship supports. You can donate money and have a scholarship in your company's name that students are getting. So there's so many different ways to think about and engaging, and it kind of just depends on whether it's you as an individual, you as an organization, you know, increasing government involvement, I think, as Dr. Mendez was saying. So there's lots of opportunities, but I just wanted to share those in our asks as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Zolick. I think there's so much we can talk about in very limited time here. I'd like to go quickly to the audience questions, some of the questions that were voted upon. The first question I see here is to the team is, lots of students initially pursue STEM degree, but transfer to liberal arts in order to receive their degree. What are the key factors for this disconnect between an interest in STEM and getting the degree? So why do we have people dropping off?
You know, can I go first? You know,
Sure.
we actually, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute funded several universities to explore that. So Northeastern has one of those grants. And because it's nationally, it's a horrific problem of young adults declaring a STEM major and then leaving it. And it's you know, having a compounding effect, you know, with the entire life cycle of college students, right? And so, you know, there's a variety of reasons, you know, that you come in and you start to doubt yourself. You don't have a mentor who says you can do this. You don't have someone, you know, following up, why didn't you show up for class? Why didn't you register for that class? If you think about the social capital thing I mentioned earlier, you don't know anyone, right? you declared STEM as a major, you came in. The unfortunate reality in many colleges is the faculty, we don't have faculty of color to mirror our students of color in STEM. We do a little bit better for women, but you take a class and you don't see anyone who looks like you teaching you, right? And it just starts to build up where you start to doubt yourself. And then that other major somehow looks a little bit more promising and an easier path. And so I think, you know, to what we've all talked about, the importance of mentors and having people who can keep these students on the path to completing their degree is critical.
You know, Martin, I think you, and I know Dean Harris, because we've talked about this before, but you may have experienced this too. A lot of young Black engineers, when they come through high school, they're breaking a mold. They're not really expected to perform well in this area. And so when you do, you sort of stand out, I guess, so to speak. But one of the things that, and we've had conversations with the College of Information Science about this, is that sometimes they're not prepared for the intensity of what the college programs require. And so it's not that they are not talented, and it's not that they don't know the work, but sometimes they're taken aback. And if you ever been in a first year science program, and you know that that's the year that makes the difference. If you struggle and fall behind that first year, it's almost impossible to catch up. And so the thing that's important is, one, and Dean Harris does this with his program, help prepare students before they come to the university, right? With a summer bridge program or some sort of engagement before they actually come to the university, so they can adjust to what's expected of them when they come. And then the second thing is, when they run into difficulties, not if, but when they run into difficulties, there are people that are gonna pick them up and say, look, you can do this. All right, you can do this. You really have the capacity. And it's that stage of doubting themselves that begins to feed on itself and feed on itself and feed on itself. And then they decide, I can't do this. And it's not necessarily that they don't have the skills or abilities, that they have lost their confidence and they figured, I just need to get a degree and get out of school. And so they decide to move into an area that's not as intense. But it takes people being able to be there with them so they don't feel all alone, to be able to advocate for them and to be able to encourage them and let them know that they can do it.
Right, thank you so much. I think for the interest of time, I'd like to ask one more question over here from the audience. Workplace conversations are often awkward and uncomfortable, especially when you speak to someone who just doesn't see the need. How do you suggest approaching conversations with colleagues about diversity in the workplace?
If I could speak to that, you know, and I think we have to be honest with the fact that, you know, the only time growth occurs is when you go through periods of discomfort. And so, unfortunately, if you're the person trying to engage someone that seems disinterested or doesn't see the value proposition as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that can be an uncomfortable spot to be in. But I think what you really want to do is have that individual kind of talk about why they don't see the value proposition. What is it that in their minds says that they prefer or identify with or don't, or see more likely the importance of a homogeneous group that is supporting a corporation or an organization, as opposed to a diverse level of individuals in that organization. Because I think you want to let them kind of start to hear themselves and help them to understand that there's a certain thought process that they've already bought into, if you will, that they need to be somewhat become aware of. And oftentimes we walk around with these voices in our heads, but until someone asks you to articulate it and to kind of express, well, why do you see it this way? Why do you think this way? It doesn't allow for that richness in conversation. It shouldn't be the person trying to convince someone else of its importance. It's really asking that person why they see or don't see the value in it, and have them have an honest conversation. The last thing I would say is there are some videos that we would recommend that we could share that actually take this from a humorous standpoint. And it's a great video. We've used it in our workshops for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's a gentleman that talks about hygiene and dental hygiene, and uses the metaphor that if you have something stuck in your tooth that you can equate as something like being racist in the way that you may respond to something, wouldn't you want someone to point that out to you and make you aware of it? Because who wants to walk around with their teeth having all this stuff stuck in it and no one's at least bringing to their attention? So it's a great video. It's maybe 10 or 11 minutes, but something that I think can allow someone to present the conversation, provide a different medium through which someone might look at this, and then may open up the dialogue.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that can cue us into some of the programs that we can have within ISPE moving forward within our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I don't want to, you know, I want to make sure that we cover as many questions as we have. I'm going to ask one more question here from the audience. How has the recent BLM and D&I initiatives changed the landscape in resolving or maybe hindering previous advances in D&I? Can you discuss benefits and potential new barriers?
I often tell my students that change usually starts on a college campus, and that it's usually students that lead the way for a lot of the social change that we have experienced in this country. And the Black Lives Matter movement, it has forced the country to accept the fact that we still have a lot of work to do and we still have a long way to go. You know, the election of President Obama, for some people, felt like the country had changed. And the Black Lives Matter movement was an emphatic, no, it hasn't. And moreover, the situation that happened at the Capitol brought it even more forcefully to the front, that this is a much bigger problem than people even realize. And so I think accepting the fact that diversity and inclusion work is difficult work. And it takes sometimes taking a step back from the conversation about the difficult issue and then getting to know and understand where people are coming from, what it is that they value, and why do they see things the way that they see it. You know, to the degree we can try to understand and walk in the shoes of somebody that we're trying to help understand, all the better. You know, I think we get too much into this trying to have a conversation and convince them that what we're sharing is the correct position and that they should agree with us by the time we finish talking. And diversity work is just not about that. It's about continuing to progress and continuing to have an impact. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's large, but never giving up on the fact that we got to keep trying and we got to keep working at this. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement was a way to say we still have work to do.
Right, Dr. Zolick, I think I saw you.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I was just going to talk from a programmatic standpoint. It's been interesting for our program. We've seen a lot more outreach from companies because I think all of a sudden the DE&I efforts are in the spotlight, and they've made promises publicly to organizations like MassBio that they're going to increase the diversity, and they're coming to us for a solution to some of their diversity, inclusion, and equity issues. And so it's been, for me, a really interesting environment that we have more industry partners to engage with, but also it almost puts us in a position where we can say, we really want to push our students into industry partners who are really going to support our learners. So how are you, as an industry partner we're going to collaborate with, going to support our students when they come into your program? You know, what type of training do you do for your employees to make a culture and a climate that our students would want to be part of? You know, it's really an interesting conversation that we're able now to have with employers, as saying, like, yeah, we do have this, you know, group of students who are interested in jobs, but they're in a, you know, our students now get to really decide what career path they want. And there's a lot more opportunities for them, I think, in this space right now, which also allows for them to have, I think, power in choosing the type of company they want to engage with. And, you know, the companies that align with their beliefs and who are really supporting students in this pathway, as opposed to someone who is just kind of showing up to check the box. And so for us, it's been an interesting time to engage and have really thoughtful conversations with our industry partners about how to systematically create change within the organization, as opposed to taking, you know, one of our students and checking that box. But I do think that the Black Lives Matter movement has created more opportunity for us to do more in this space, which I'm thankful for.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that background. I think I saw a question here. Are there tools you recommend to keep non-diverse employees feel comfortable with challenging conversations? I think Dean Harris has answered that. He's put in a YouTube video about the dental hygiene humor that he was talking about. I quickly want to ask a question here to Dr. Amendaris, because I think this might apply. How can folks at the individual, here it is. Where is it? I just had it here. It had to do with ERG. Let me see where that question is. All of a sudden it's lost now, huh? All right, here we go. The question was, how can a company get involved with an employee resource group, get involved with having, where is it? How can folks at the, oh my goodness. I can't believe.
I think you're looking for my question there, Martin, which was, how can folks who are looking to start an employee resource group at their company, what are some tips or tools that they can use to do that? Is that the question you were looking for?
That's exactly that. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of models out there. I think, you know, my advice is it's always I've always found it effective to have a few people who are really critical and good networkers who can bring people together to start these groups, to have goals in mind. What are you trying to do, and how does that connect to the goals of the company? So the goals of the company might be employee retention, it might be recruitment, it might be help us sell more widgets to an audience, whatever it is, whatever whatever is important to the company, your employee resource group should be able to contribute to that. And I think that's easy to do, because if it's retention, then you're creating an opportunity for people to network and not be isolated and do professional development. If it's recruitment, we can attend job fairs, we can go out and talk to college students, we can sponsor, or be mentors or role models. So I really think it depends on what your company's initiatives are, whether that's related to diversity or not. Most large companies that have affinity groups, there is a connection to what the company is trying to do. To just have a social group to hang out isn't something that most companies are going to support. So I think, getting a sense of what's important to your company and how is this group going to be supportive of that. And if diversity is important, then how is your group going to be supportive of that?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, we are so running a little bit late on time. This is such a great conversation here. I wish I could keep this moving. I just want to.
I just want to make one that I think is a very important point.
Go ahead.
To highlight. I really want to encourage us to take a moment to understand what our Asian brothers and sisters are going through right now on our campus. They're really experiencing a lot of backlash from this pandemic, and I would encourage us to really take some time to find out and understand and find ways that we can help and support them.
Thank you for that feedback, Dr. O'Brien. So I'd like to quickly switch it over to Eric to just give us a close. I just want to thank the panel for the breadth of information that you've given unto us. I think with the videos that from this recorded session, we can get a lot of learning, about where diversity and inclusion, what type of programs are available to different to all the different audience members. Right, and really, start to get involved and take action based off of some of the things that we've heard about. Thank you so much for the audience members to be able to pay attention. Thank you so much for the speakers for your time and attention to this. Eric, let me switch it over to you.
Yeah, I just gonna echo that remark and just thank you. Just thank you. This is just the beginning of our journey as a chapter in this initiative. I wanted to just thank you. There was great participation here. There was awesome information from each one of the panelists, and your engagement was just incredible. We just encourage you to join ISPE Boston and volunteer with our program if that's something that interests you, and we'll try and find different roles for different people, and depending on how much time and effort and what you want to be able to do, and just try to get you in the mix, because there is a lot to be done, and I just really wanted to thank you all. But you'll receive a short follow-up survey, and we really appreciate your feedback. I want to thank again our sponsor, Delta Project Management, and on behalf of ISPE Boston and our presenters, thank you again for joining us, and have a great evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a nice one, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes, it was short but sweet.